welcome to today's exclusive masterclass on policies for net zero targets, a review. We are thrilled to have you all here as we explore how effective policy frameworks are driving the transition towards net zero and sustainable economic growth. And it's an absolute honor to introduce our distinguished speaker for the day, Professor Atulan Guha, who is an associate professor of economics at Indian Institute of Management, Kashipur. Professor Guha brings with him over 17 years of rich experience in academic and research, specializing in developmental economics, macroeconomic policy, and international trade. His research delves deep into the economic implication of sustainability policies and market transition towards net zero. And he has actually contributed extensively to policy research, academic publication, and national economic consultations. We are truly privileged to have him with us today to share his expertise on this important subject. With that, I would like to hand over the forum to Professor Guha to take us through the today's session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neha, for a very generous introduction. Okay. Today in this evening, actually, we are going to start discussions on the net zero policies. Okay. And so it will more of a, I guess, is the one-way traffic, not so much of multilateral interactions. Okay. So let me just begin then. Okay. If you have any questions, you can actually specifically ask at the beginning. Do you have any questions? Do you have any expectations from me? Okay, let me then start. So can you see my slides? Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. The today's topic is policies for net zero targets. But the question is, what is net zero targets and why the net zero targets? Okay. So let me begin with this question. Why the net zero targets at all? Okay. The net zero target has come from a aim which has been globally accepted by almost all the countries, and that global aim is that limit global warming to 1.5 degree increase from the global average temperature during pre-industrial period of 1850. Okay, and this we have done in Paris. Okay, there was a convention in Paris and there we have done it. Okay. Now the question is, why we have actually taken this aim, okay, 1.5 degree. That's the one question. And second question is that once we have taken this aim of actually limit the global warming at 1.5 degree, how do we achieve it? Okay. And in order to achieve as an intermediate state, a net zero target has been adopted. Okay. What do you mean by net zero? Net zero means the addition to the greenhouse gases should be zero. The addition of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere should be zero. That's why it's called net zero. Let us first deal with the first question. Why this 1.5 degree? Okay. And if it is not 1.5 degree, what will happen? Okay. So to begin with, I will actually start with a small video of 4-5 minutes. I hope that will actually make you little aware of the issues we are talking about.
We are already seeing how a warmer planet is changing life for all living things. Right now, the Earth is 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than averages from 1850 to 1900, known as pre-industrial levels. So far, we're adapting to the changes this causes. But if the planet warms by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, it's more likely that the consequences will overwhelm us. Scientists agree that 1.5 degrees is the tipping point into uncertainty. So world leaders have set this as the tolerable limit to global temperature increase. How did they decide this? What does warming of 1.5 degrees or more look like? If today's trends continue, sometime between 2030 and 2052, that's in 10 to 30 years from now, the Earth will be more than 1.5 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels. Carrying on as we are means a 2.7 degree increase by the end of the century. Species of insects, plants, and animals are already dying off and losing their habitats. We're seeing extreme weather and rising sea levels. Our health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, and economies will suffer. Risks vary from region to region, but at 2 degrees warmer or more, all risks are more likely and will have a stronger impact. Flooding and heat waves could happen annually, not just once a decade. Millions more people will face water scarcity. Millions of people all over the world are likely to be affected by sea level rises. Large parts of major cities like London will flood regularly. Some areas could be completely submerged. The conflicts over scarce resources and displaced populations that will follow will affect us all, and many of these impacts will be irreversible. So how do we limit warming? Like an insulating blanket, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, chief among them carbon dioxide, are trapping heat from escaping back into space. The Earth's well-established energy balance created a stable climate for thousands of years, but it's now being disrupted. Continuous measurements of atmospheric CO2 have been taken in Hawaii since 1958, creating a record of steadily rising levels. Since the 1990s, CO2 levels have risen even more quickly. And it was in the 1990s that governments and coalitions across the world finally began to take coordinated action to slow the warming. 1992. 197 countries adopt the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, to respond to the threat of continued warming. From this arose the annual Conference of the Parties, the COP, to negotiate climate action on a global scale. 1997. COP3 in Kyoto leads to the Kyoto Protocol, a commitment to national targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It also creates emissions permit trading, known as carbon markets, which we'll look at more in another video. 2015. COP21 in Paris sees 193 nations agree to intensify efforts towards a sustainable low-carbon future. These nations pledge to limit warming to under 2 degrees this century, ideally less. 2021. COP26 in Glasgow reviews progress and concludes that more needs to be done. In the climate pact that comes out of discussions, the president of the conference says that the 1.5 degrees warming target is alive, but its pulse is weak. Making sure that global warming doesn't exceed 1.5 degrees by 2100 is considered achievable, realistic, and will enable sustainable climate-resilient development. Targets agreed in Paris are regularly under review. Governments and companies are acting to reduce emissions, and the window of opportunity is still open. The most recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change indicates that a great deal of transformation needs to happen this decade. However, while great strides have been made in expediting measures such as cheaper renewable energy, experts agree that there is still untapped potential in the tech and policy worlds to allow regular people to make more climate-friendly choices. We're not starting from zero, so every tiny increase in temperature affects the planet's systems. But this means that every tiny reduction in greenhouse gas emissions matters too. The actions you take today do have an impact on tomorrow.
So this video is actually very nicely summarized that why we need this 1.5 degree, and if average, and if we actually allow more to grow the temperature gradually, what kind of things will actually happen. Okay, now, but this is also true that if we say, suppose, we should be very clear about it, if it is become 1.5 become 1.55, okay, we should not lose hope. But the thing is that if it goes further and further, okay, then there will be problems that this video has already mentioned to us. Okay, and that's why this aim is there. Okay, now, as I said, to achieve this aim, one of the first steps which has been taken is the maintaining that we should not add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere anymore. Okay, so that should be, if there is an addition, there has to be a reduction. Okay, so the balance should be maintained. Okay, and to do that, if you look at the range of policies which has been actually been adopted or suggested, are drastically cutting emissions, carbon emissions, balancing any remaining unavoidable emissions with carbon removals, such as through afforestation or carbon capture technologies. So these are essentially the two broad pillar of suggestions. Okay, first we remove the drastically cutting the emissions, and then how we can actually re-inject the environment with actually that without carbon, removing the carbon. This I have that it has been already discussed in this video, so I am not going into the detail of it. But if why 1.5 degrees Celsius is matters, the avoiding catastrophic tipping points, reduced frequency of intensity of extreme weather, slowing sea level rise, protecting biodiversity and ecosystem, and enhancing food security and health. So these are the broad areas where actually we will have, essentially this essentially indicates that our day-to-day life will be very badly affected, okay, if we don't have the 1.5 degrees Celsius maintenance. Okay, as I said, that to achieve this aim, this net zero policy has been adopted, that target has been taken. And what is this policy framework? And so there are policies has been suggested, how do we maintain this net zero? Okay, and this net zero framework, which has been adopted globally, it has few corner points, or the cornerstone, you can say. The first one is that the decarbonization of the electricity systems. So essentially that means that we will get rid of the fossil fuel, use of fossil fuel to generate the energy. Okay, so most of the energy, which the different alternative sources, that should be replaced by the producing through electricity. And in order to produce the electricity, we should actually get rid of fossil fuel like coal, etc. Okay, and it should be primarily replaced with the renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydro. Okay, so that's the first cornerstone of this net zero policy framework. The second cornerstone is the energy efficiency, in the sense that how we can actually minimize the use of energy. Okay, so that's a second cornerstone of this whole net zero policy framework. And this minimization of energy use, that can be in the buildings, can be in the industrial process, can be in the transportations. Okay, so how we can actually reduce the use of energy. Okay, so that's the second cornerstone of this net policy framework. Third is, okay, so third essentially is actually, if say, the idea is that even if people try, okay, they may not be always be as efficient as it should be. Okay, and there may be, and since for work energy is required. Okay, so can we have a system, instead of actually putting by force, okay, by diktat, okay, that, well, this is your energy quota and you have to use it, only this much only you can use, beyond that you cannot use. Okay, now so that would have been actually create huge inefficiency into the production system, because all of us, we know that we are no longer in the central plan economy. We are more of in the, most of the countries in the world are in the, based upon the market economy. And in the market economy, what happens? We incentivize those work which is desirable by the society and economy, and disincentivize those work which are not desirable by the society and the economy. Okay, so that is how we work. And so the individuals, based upon this incentive system or disincentive system, take their decisions. Okay, so carbon pricing is essentially is that system, where the carbon pricing gives us a system where there is a higher cost if somebody actually either don't decarbonize, limit the carbon use. Okay, if they don't reduce the carbon use or become more energy inefficient, okay, then they have to pay higher. Okay, generally in the traditional market economy system, this was not been there before. Okay, and so this has been incorporated, and that gives the system of carbon pricing. Okay, in this lecture I will actually discuss in detail about the carbon pricing later. And the fourth pillar is the low carbon technology investment, in the sense that, thing is that even if we want to have use of generation of low carbon or use of low carbon, okay, the technology may not be available. Okay, so there has to be innovations in the science and technology front. Okay, and where we can capture the carbon, we can utilize or storage the electricity, electric transport, green hydrogen. So these are the actually new areas of new technological innovations which is required. Okay, and so if there is an investment on this front, so that is actually the fourth cornerstone. Okay, where actually the kind of technology we need to create which actually reduce the greenhouse emissions. And the fifth one is the nature-based solutions to the net zero policy, net zero problems, and that is that, the restoring and expanding natural carbon sink, such as forest and wetland, and help absorb residual emissions. Okay, you must be knowing that the greenhouses, the major thing is the carbon dioxide. And can you tell me which element in the world which has a life can actually process the carbon dioxide. That element is trees, okay, forests, okay. And so if we can actually have more trees, more forests, okay, and so on and so forth, they actually naturally absorb the carbon dioxide and create the oxygens, okay, and so that get into the our food system and so on and so forth, okay. So that's the nature-based solutions, how we can take those actions. So these are actually the 5 pillars of the net zero policy framework, which has been adopted globally. Okay, do I make myself clear? Any questions? This net zero target, as I already said, that and you have seen the videos also, there was a Paris Convention 2015, okay, and where all the countries actually came together and actually accepted this, that how to achieve the net zero target. Now question is that one tricky thing of this global warming is that it affects everybody, okay. If it actually affect India, it will affect Bangladesh also, Sri Lanka also, Pakistan also, and so on and so forth. Or if there is actually some problem in any of these countries, this will affect all the neighboring countries. Even actually, it will affect gradually to all the countries of the world, okay, to a greater extent and the lesser extent, but everybody will be affected. So that's a thing for the global one. But the problem is that the governance of the globe and world are essentially based upon the countries, okay. So it is much easier to actually, if we can have country level action points, okay, and some global cooperations, okay, that is much more feasible. And looking at that feasibility, every country, so it is all the countries' government actually participated in these global conferences, and once they have committed, most of them countries either has created a national laws to reach the net zero targets, or they have adopted policies, okay, which actually will lead to the emission reductions and getting into the net zero target, okay. And so every countries have agreed they will actually provide and share with each other a nationally determined contributions to this whole fight against the global warming, to actually contribution to the how to create the net zero situation in the globe, okay. And so this is called NDCs, or nationally determined contributions. And under the Paris agreements, countries set 5-year NDCs, so 5 years action plans they actually give, and then again they will give another, etc, etc, okay. And many have updated this to include the net zero goal, okay. So and secondly, the countries have also committed to the long-term low carbon development strategies, okay. And so these strategies provide a long-term vision for decarbonization, and that covers the multiple sector, because as you understand that this requires actually, this net zero target requires a major change in the how do you look at the energy, okay, how do you look at the use and the production of carbon. So there is that require a major structural change of the economic system, okay. And so that is actually a very long-term process, okay. And so every countries also have actually created a long-term low carbon development strategies, okay. Now Now, these policies or these strategies, if you actually look at, we can actually also divide them into sectoral way. As we said that, as UN documents actually tells that these are the sectoral actions point they actually identify, which are very important for the net zero targets to achieve. First one is we need to change the transport system. Okay, and major key points are promoting electrical vehicles, okay, developing public transport, etc., etc. Okay. Second is the industry, which actually encourages a low emission industrial system, circular economic practice. I will come to those terminologies later. And then building how it can be more energy efficient and material efficient. And then actually it also has led to because you see all these, okay, because if you need to change the energy use system, energy production system, okay, industrial system, material use system, okay, how do we treat our wastes, okay, all these you need to actually change. It actually requires huge financing, okay, and how so that essentially brings the next kind of issues in this, that how do we actually finance these changes or achievement of the net zero targets, okay, and because as we know that the savers often does not spend so much, okay, and the financial sector play the role of that intermediary between the savers and the spenders. Okay, and so here essentially the imagination of financial instruments has been done, which actually bridge the gap between the savers who saves in the economy and those who want to invest or spend on getting the net zero transition or the net zero system. Okay, and so we have this whole green bonds, climate finance instruments. So those have been actually coming in, and then the market alone cannot do all this. Okay, because I already mentioned that market functions based upon the incentives which actually got created and how individual people react to that. Okay, but somebody need to create that incentives and disincentives, and that's why the government comes into play, the state comes into play, and they uses various fiscal policies like taxes and subsidies, etc., where we can actually foster the process of creating the greater incentive and disincentive in favor of adopting the net zero states. Do I make myself clear? Okay. Now I'll come to the country-wise, a very basic glimpse I'll give the country-wise what various countries has done, okay, regarding adopting the net zero policies. A very brief discussions, because the detailed discussion country-wise is actually cannot be done within this 1 hour or 75 minutes lecture, which may be during the course. Okay, the whole course is there. There will be specialized sessions for different countries. Okay, now let me just give you a brief glimpse of what the different countries has done. United States has put out to achieve the net zero targets by 2050. Okay, and this commitment specifically targets all greenhouse gases. Okay, that they will control the emission of these. Okay, and discourage it. They include CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, etc., etc. But it is not actually legally binding on the United States government. Okay, it's their policy objective, high level policy objectives. Okay, and the interim goal of policy measures are actually, they have done this and given 2000 till 2030 at the NDC they have given. The US is commits to reduce the net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% of their 2005 level. Power sector to achieve 100% clean electricity by 2035, etc., etc. Okay, clean power electrifications they are talking about, methane reductions they are talking about, and they are talking about the carbon removal by increasing the forestation and all those stuff. Okay, and some of the technological solutions for carbon capture. So these are the basic parameters or cornerstone of the United States policy on the net zero target. Okay. Then come to China. China's target year is the 2060. Okay, they said that by 2060, definitely we are going to achieve the net zero targets. Okay, and so their commitment primarily targets reduction of carbon dioxide emissions, not so much on other greenhouse gases as in US policy. And legal status, again, this is not a law to Chinese government, but it's a very high level policy objectives and core focus of the nation's economic strategy. Okay, so what are the interim goals they have put it in their NDCs? First is that they aim to increase the share of the renewable energy, non-fossil fuels, okay, around 25% by 2030 and over 80% by 2060. And they want to increase the energy efficiency by reduction of energy consumption emission per unit of GDP, and they want to reduce or limit the coal consumption, again the fossil fuel. Okay, and other part is that electrification and reforestations, okay, and promoting new energy vehicles, okay, like you already know the electric vehicles, etc., etc., increasing forest cost. So these are the basic premises on the Chinese policy is operating. Okay. Next bigger group of countries or bigger group is actually the European Union. For them, again, target year just like US is 2050, but they have passed a law, so it is legally binding through European climate law. Okay, and in fact, Europe is actually one of the most leading European Union leading segment of the world, which has been much more enthusiastically actually pursuing the net zero goals. Okay, they have a 2030 targets by reducing the GHG in greenhouse gas emission at least by 55% compared to 1990 level. Okay, and they have interim targets of 2030 target, 2040 targets, etc., etc. And they have a very broad and elaborate strategy. Okay, if you want to get into the European Green Deal and all those are actually part of this net zero targets. And India is, again, for India the target year is 2070. Okay, and again it's not a law, it's a high level policy commitment. Okay, and the key aspects of this commitment is actually 7 key transitions they are talking about: the low carbon electricity and transportation, sustainable urbanization, decoupling industrial growth from emissions, developing carbon removal solutions, enhancing forest cover, and addressing financial needs for the transition. So more or less similar of what the other countries are doing. And the interim goals in their NDC, what they have said, that achieve 500 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030, meet 50% of energy need from renewable sources by 2030, reduce projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons, and reduce carbon intensity of the economy by 45% below 2005 level, and achieve the net zero emissions by 2070. So these are essentially the country level, Okay, country level thing. Just a minute, I got few questions. I have already answered in India there seems to be no regulatory framework for stricter inclusion. What might be the reasons? Okay. Thing is that it is not so simple to actually just, because given the state of the production and the state of the income, you need to have a much more gradual approach. Okay. And so that may be the reason compelling the government not to take so drastic. And well, it is, we are actually still far actually how close we are technology. I will come to that. Okay. And are indices binding or non-binding? No, it depends. It is, they are non-binding. It's a commitment. Okay, but these are not law. Okay. Okay. So if we look at this, the major countries of the world, I will just discuss the country experience and policies. What are the common policy elements they have? Okay. So one is that emission reduction, that is the one part. Second is carbon removal, that's a major second part. Third is the transition to cleaner energy, 1, 2. And fourth is that there is some regulatory measures they have taken, like increasing the vehicle energy efficiency, introduction of electrical vehicles, and carbon pricing. Okay, so I'll actually now get into this a little bit more, but especially I will actually discuss about the carbon pricing more details in these regulatory measures. But this is more or less the summary of whatever be the policy initiatives taken by the various government across the globe. I have already discussed, it is coming out from the discussions we have done country-wise now. Okay. So now I'll come to the what are the market instruments, because you know that this is very important for the market economy to function. That is our economy to functions, and I have already given some glimpse of it. Okay. There are most 5 actually which is actually been actually in force in various countries. Okay, the carbon pricing and carbon credits offsets. Okay, the carbon pricing has actually 2 parts. One is that carbon tax, and there is the carbon credit trading system and all. And with that, carbon credits and offsets actually come into being. Okay, so these two together, essentially, the objective of these two actually, these two instruments, objective of these two instruments are essentially to disincentivize the carbon emission and limit the carbon emission. Okay, so these are the two objectives for it. And then I have already discussed that what is the need for finance in this whole transition. It is very much needed. And so there are green financial instruments are available, green bonds and so on and so forth. Okay. And third, this is actually, you know, the one of the major cornerstone of this net zero target is to how we can actually replace the fossil fuel based energy with a renewable energy. But the question, the issue is that how do we make renewable energy is a sustainable business proposition in the economy? Okay. But unfortunately, given the technology and the cost and all, okay, we have to still go some distance on this, and to actually to meet that distance, okay, these policies are actually available where actually it facilitates the renewable energy production and distributions, okay, like giving the access to national grids and so on and so forth, because it has an intermittency problem of renewable energy. and those kind of things are actually is a difficult thing. Okay, storage is an issue because it's intermittent supply. Storage cannot be done. Electricity we know, and so if it can be put up the part of the national feed and national grid, and actually also combined with the a balance between renewable and the fossil fuel energy, still what it's actually working right now. But we are not in a still position to have 100% renewable energy kind of things. Okay, so that technology is still not there. Okay, but here in this lecture, instead of getting into these two, is green financial instruments and renewable energies, I will primarily concentrate on this. Okay, the carbon pricing, it has two systems. One is emission trading system and carbon taxes. Okay, emission trading system is essentially, for the say, there is a quantitative limit on total emissions are being actually put in. Okay, so it is work like this. So for a particular sector, so this much of quantity of emissions is allowed, and then this quota has been distributed to all the companies, okay, of that sector. Okay, and those companies need to keep their emission below that. If they can keep below that, the how much they have been below, against that they get the carbon credit. Okay, and they can actually then they can sell this carbon credit to those companies, okay, who is not able to limit their emission below the permissible level which is decided, and so they can trade. So that is how this ETS and cap and trade actually works. And carbon tax is actually put a direct price on emissions. Okay, so it is generally, so it is government put a tax on the, if there is a emissions is there. Okay, so government actually put as a per unit emissions taxes around. Okay, now the advantage disadvantage of these two is that, say, this first one put a cap on overall emissions. Okay, and the second one essentially make the emissions more costly. Okay, but one disadvantage of first one is that if the individual firm's cap is very loosely kept, then it may not work. Okay, now the economic theory behind the carbon tax. Okay, the do you have idea of externality? Okay, the externality is cost or benefit to an uninvolved third party that arises as the effect of another party's economic activity. And there are two kinds of externalities, positive and negative. Activities that create positive externality should be subsidized, and activities that create negative externality should be taxed. That is actually the public finance theory tells us. And CO2 emission is considered to be negative externality. We know why. Okay, I don't need to put. And so Professor Pigou, who suggested, and this is called Pigouvian tax, that we should actually tax the good that is the source of the negative externality. Okay, so that's why thereby internalize the negative effect in the production cost, because otherwise it was not been there. Okay, and this tax is generally calculated based on the social cost of carbon. Okay, and which attempts to calculate the numeric cost of externalities of carbon pollution. Okay, and in fact, you must have heard of Professor Nordhaus, Samuelson Nordhaus, who was a Nobel laureate in this area. He actually one of the first person who gave the idea, he actually gave how we can measure the social cost of carbon, and he got the Nobel for that. Okay. Now, as I said, that what should be the efficient carbon tax, or what should be the carbon tax rate, that is important. And the carbon tax rate is the rate for a unit of product equals with the marginal damage of the carbon emissions from the product. It should be equal. And we generally, as we said, that various countries have actually calculated the social cost of carbon. Okay, it varies country to country. There are no agreement in it, but that many of the countries, especially US and all, they have actually reached into certain agreement. Well, this is the social cost of carbon, and some of the carbon tax has been actually implemented in these countries. Okay. Second, I have the carbon emission trading. I have already discussed what does it mean. Okay. So emission levels are limited and emission permits traded among the emitters. Okay. And emission trading sets a quantitative total limit on the emissions produced by all. I have already discussed about it. Okay. So there is a limit which has been put, and every individual, every entity, so this limit had been put it in the sectoral level. Okay. And then every entity, every firm get some portion of it, and if they do more than that, then they have to purchase the credit, or if they actually produce less than that, then they can actually sell it. Okay. And so this is how it functions. Okay. Now these permits can be, for the pollution, can be issued by via government auctions or offered without charge based on the existing emissions. So there are various systems there. Okay, I am not getting into it because of the time limitations. Okay, and you can understand this carbon trading. This essentially comes from this system, not the carbon tax, but the other one. Okay, because where actually the companies can trade the carbon points and the carbon certificates with each other. And so that created a market, and at 2023 the value of traded carbon dioxide was roughly around $949 billion. Okay, and it is the European Union emission trading system. They are the largest and the oldest, and they are actually 87% of the global market size, followed by China. Okay, and in terms of, but they are actually far lower. And in terms of trading volume, approximately 12.5 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide are traded in this global carbon market in 2022. Okay, so this is what is the global carbon market. Okay, now as I said that in this ETS system or the global carbon market, alternatively you can say, what they trade the carbon credit. Okay, what is this carbon credit? Carbon credit is a tradable instrument, typically a virtual certificate that conveys a claim to avoid the greenhouse gas emissions and to enhance the removal of greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere. Okay, so one carbon credit is generally equivalent to avoidance of or enhancing the reduction of 1 metric ton of CO2 or equivalent. Okay, so that is how one carbon credit has been measured. Okay, so carbon credit trading mechanism, what helps? It enables the project developers to implement projects that mitigate greenhouse gases and receive carbon credits, which can be sold to the interested buyers who may use the credits to claim that they have offset their inventory greenhouse gas emissions or within their limit of green gas emissions. Okay, so this is how this actually operate. Okay, now we'll come to India. Okay, in India, let me tell you one thing: we don't have the carbon tax. Okay, we do have taxes, high taxes on many of the energy, especially the petrol energy and all. But we really don't have the carbon tax. Okay, based upon the calculation of the social cost of carbon and so on and so forth. So that system we simply don't have. Okay, but what we are trying to have is a emission trading scheme or system, right, which the Europe have that kind. Okay, And so we are in the path of that, and we are planning to create this domestic trading platform by mid 2026, and it is notified in 2023. Okay, and this, what are the intensive sector? So there are 9 sectors which have been identified as the energy intensive sector. Okay, so those companies under these sectors has to be actually part of this. Okay, and these sectors are aluminium, alkali, cement, fertilizer, iron, steel, pulp and paper, petrochemicals, petroleum refinery and textile, and later many more sectors may be added. Okay, and also those companies who want to participate in this voluntarily, they are also allowed to do so. What are the mechanisms? For mandatory compliance, the entities that reduce their greenhouse gas intensity below the target receive carbon credit certificates, and those that fail to meet their target must purchase these carbon credit certificates from the market. Okay, and so you can understand that it depends upon really on carbon credit certificate and what are the target given. If the target given is too high, okay, that means that there will be excess supply of carbon credit certificates, and so there will be no price of the pollution itself. Okay, so it is very important for this institution to work that the greenhouse gas limitation or limit for each company should be a reasonable amount. Okay, and second is the voluntary entities that can generate carbon credits, including those for green hydrogen production, renewable energy, and mangrove afforestation, etc. Okay. We actually did, so this is going to come from CCTS. We are actually transitioning from something called PAT. Okay, and PAT really did not work, which is essentially or restrictions on the energy use, not the greenhouse gas. So that's why the CCTS coverage is much more. Okay, and PAT was not very successful because there was an oversupply of certificates as the reduction targets are too liberal. Okay, and there is a nominal fines for non-compliance. So but we hope that we are moving to a CCTS and it will work. Okay, now how much time I have left with? Okay, now I will actually start the what are the mechanisms which allow the international transactions of the carbon credit. Okay, or cross-border trading. You know, cross-border trading can also happen in 2 types of markets. One is compliance markets and second is the voluntary carbon market. Now, compliance markets, okay, primarily regulated by the government and generally operate through the bilateral agreements. You know that there is a Paris Agreement, Article 6. I am not getting into it. That Article 6.6.2 and 6.4, okay, which essentially gives the framework for this kind of bilateral agreements. Okay, and so for India actually have a bilateral agreement with Japan, and negotiations are going on with Singapore, South Korea, and Sweden, UAE, etc. And the agreement with Japan, it actually what it is there, it essentially says that if there is any multinational company who set up a factory in India and earn the carbon credit, they can sell that carbon credit to Japan. Okay, so essentially it facilitated the receiving of FDI in the low polluting sector or low energy intensive sector. Okay, so this is what is the situation for India. And you know, if you look at the globally, okay, so how this international transactions of carbon credit actually work. Okay. You see, the major carbon credit transaction internationally happens to the second one, not so much on through compliance market, but primarily through voluntary carbon market. Okay. And so how it works? The individual companies or project developers can generate carbon credits and sell them to buyers in other countries who want to voluntarily offset their emissions. Okay. And then companies can develop projects, renewable energy, afforestation, waste management through those things, and get certified by independent international standards like verified carbon standards of Vera or the gold standard. And once verified, these credits can be issued into a registry, and then these credits can be sold to the voluntary buyers, okay, across the globe. Okay, and some of the major agencies globally who issue these certificates and actually get into the registry are these are generally controlled or dominated by this big four registry, verified carbon standard, VCS by Vera, okay, and then gold standard, okay, and the American Carbon Registry Climate Action Reserves. And please mind that these big four, those who are registered, most of them are actually, almost all of them are actually non-profit organizations. Okay, still it is so still it is. So what I'm trying to say is that the international cooperations among the government and building institutions which is actually operate globally, still it's a long way to go. Okay. And what are the global integration of emission trading system? Why this global integration is important. I have already mentioned that this greenhouse gas emissions that affect everybody, every country. Okay, so one country or single country cannot fight it alone. So there is a requirement of global integrations, but which still is actually long way to go. And as these markets are actually just coming, carbon markets, there are only 36 ETS or carbon markets globally. Okay, and I have already said the European Union emission trading is the largest. Okay, and the state of global integration is that a unified global system is still not there. Some of the existing system has been linked, like European Union ETS is linked with the Switzerland's ETS, or California and Quebec ETS are linked. Okay, but it has to. There is a global integration is required. So that essentially means that one can actually get the carbon point and actually can sell it easily globally, and the thing is that carbon point created by one country or authorized by one country's agency should be actually get validated by all other countries and so on and so forth. So those kind of things is still required for this, but still we are long way to go. Now, since I have few minutes left, okay, another 5 minutes left. So in this 5 minutes, I will actually 5 minutes. I will actually talk about what are the new business opportunities this actually this transition is actually giving us. Okay, see, first if we look at the energy and technology sector, okay, that giving us a big opportunities, a new way of doing business. Okay, and renewable energy, as you know, that it's increasingly the better market is being created, government supports is there, etc., etc. So invest in on-site solar and wind installation, use power purchase agreement by clean energy from a provider. So that's a one new business opportunity is coming. The second kind of business opportunity is coming in the field of carbon capture and removal. So develop and implement technologies to capture and store carbon dioxide from industrial process. And then third is the hydrogen and battery storage. Okay, so there is a growing market for green hydrogen and advanced battery storage solutions. Okay, so those are actually critical for decarbonization sectors like transportation, heavy industry. So these are the new segment of business actually coming in. Okay. The second category actually, we can put it is the circular economy and product innovations. Okay. The circular economy models that create business models that focus on reuse, repair, and recycling of product to reduce waste. Okay, and need for new materials. There are sustainable products, develop and market products that are designed for lower environmental impact. You know, the sustainability of source material, etc., etc. So the green product, we say, often marketed like that. And then the green services. Okay, what are the green services? Provide the services that help other companies to achieve their net zero goals, such as carbon footprint calculation, sustainability consulting, supply chain decarbonization process suggesting consulting. Okay, so these are the green services which are emerging. Okay. Okay. Then the third category of opportunities coming in the transportation and logistics. You know, the electrification is happening, development or deployment of electric vehicles is happening, so that is bringing a new business opportunities. Then charging infrastructure, related service for public and private transportation. Okay, so those are the new businesses coming in. Okay, and then sustainable fuels, innovate production, use of sustainable aviation and maritime fuels. So these are the things which is coming in. The other opportunities comes in the supply chain solutions, like offer services and technologies to help other businesses track and reduce emission throughout the entire supply chain. Okay, and then the awareness programs. So those are the another way of another things is coming, new avenues for the media and the PR agencies, the employees and consumer engagement. Okay, so that's another opportunities. I will, since I have actually received in your chat one thing on the circular economy, so I will actually discuss various variety of circular economy little bit. Okay, since I have 1 or 2 minutes left. Okay, 2 minutes left. Okay. Now, the key business models which is coming arising of net zero targets, one of them is the circular economy model. Okay, so these models focus on eliminating waste and continual use of resources by designing product for durability, reuse, and repair and recycling. There are 3 categories of circular economy models are available. One is that product as a service. So instead of selling physical product, what companies does is they lease the product, maintain the ownership, and it also take the responsibility of it is upkeep, repair, and end of life recycling. Okay, and this incentivizes the durability and efficient resources. Okay, that's a one kind of circular economy model is coming. Okay, especially for the heavy machines and all, these are actually very important. The second actually is closed loop manufacturing and recycling, where the company designed the process to reuse their own products material. You know, the from the waste itself. Okay, the rejected waste itself, they can actually produce or bring the materials which recover the materials, and I can use it, recycle and reuse it further. Okay, so many of the IT instruments are actually one of those actually. And the third category of circular economy models are the prioritizing the low carbon, recycled or regenerative materials in production. Okay, so you can do that, and the different economic theories are actually being used and actually the different business models. So the second one essentially enhance the economies of scope. Okay, you must have heard of that ethanol now is actually increasingly will become part of the petrol. Now it is actually a use of principle of economies of scope because the sugar from the sugar mills, okay, from the sugar cane, India is actually one of the largest producer of the sugar. Actually, I think second largest after the Brazil. Okay, so increasingly, so that much of sugar is not commercially viable. Okay, so this actually say part of the sugar cane, if can be used to produce the ethanol and which can be then used as a part of the petrol. Okay, so it actually serves both the purpose that increase the sustainability of the sugarcane farmers, sugar mills, and also it increase the possibility of actually reducing the fossil fuel. Okay, so these are there are various models can be on the circular economy models. Okay, but the thing is that among them the most lucrative are one actually where actually you can use economies of scope much better.